The Empire's track record on rights for non-humans is not exactly stellar. There were multiple cases of abuses aside from just being generally humanocentric, but sometimes people try to point to improvements in alien rights under the Empire in later stages, especially towards the start of the Yuzon-Vong War. Now, while it's true that there were certain advancements in rights for non-humans over the post-Endor period, like aliens serving as stormtroopers under Natasi Dala and Darksaber, a lot of the people in charge of the Empire, especially on the political side, still engaged in some pretty terrible practices and held some pretty terrible beliefs about the value of non-human lives. Today we're going to be talking about a specific example that comes up in Force Heretic Remnant, a book set during the Yuzon-Vong War, 28 years after the Battle of Yavin. In this book, the newly formed Galactic Alliance, which is more or less just the New Republic at this point, is trying to gain the cooperation of the Empire against the Yuzon-Vong. Some guy named Luke Skywalker and his nephew Jason are with a party of Jedi going to bring the Empire into the Alliance. They arrive at the Imperial capital, Bastion, while the Yuzon-Vong Armada is wiping out the Imperial fleet there. This battle leaves Supreme Commander Gilad Pellaeon led by many on the Moff Council. One particular Moff, Fennec, begins bringing power to himself. He'd essentially been a political opponent of Pellaeon's, looking for any opportunity to bring the fleet, which was pretty universally loyal to Pellaeon, under his own influence, so he's not exactly a fringe figure. When Jason is arguing with Fennec in favor of abandoning the shipyards of Yaga Minor, where Fennec was planning to stage their last defense, to another planet, Borosk, the following exchange happens. Moff Fennec, Jason said as placatingly as he could, "If you'll just listen to what I have to say." Moff Fennec snorted, "And give you the opportunity to plant your thoughts in my head? I'm not stupid, boy, I'm not senile. Who do you take me for? I was hunting Eloms decades before you were even born." Now, Eloms are a sentient, intelligent species from the planet of Elom, home to a pair of species known as the Elom and Elomin. You may recognize them from episode 6, where an Elom former rebel spy named Tanis Spidgic was working in Jabba's palace as an informant. Elomin had long been part of galactic society, but the Elom had lived in smaller communities underground in caves on Elom for a long time. They were definitely the kind of species that the Empire would have considered primitive, choosing to remain primarily within their underground communities and finding it amusing when the Republic had granted them land titles to their own land, but they were generally quite peaceful and community-oriented. Some left their caves and joined the wider galaxy, in some cases becoming even bounty hunters, or otherwise joining the criminal underworld. This is suggested by the Galaxy Guide to be because they were generally just having their tendency for strong community bonds taken advantage of by criminal elements. Whatever the case, they were definitely highly intelligent, sentient beings. So the idea that they were being hunted for sport regularly by Moff Fennec and maybe other Imperials is pretty reprehensible. The Empire enslaved both the Elom and the Elomin, and some Elom even fought with the rebellion like we mentioned earlier with the spy. On top of this slavery, we have at the very least this example of Fennec, who would hunt this species for sport. You could point to this as just being one example, but considering how Fennec was more than willing to publicly boast about this to Jason Solo, it seems like this wasn't a huge deal to the rest of the Imperials. The entire conversation with Jason was being monitored, and at least nobody seemed alarmed at what he was saying there. And this isn't just some fringe figure either, this is someone who seemed like they were going to essentially take over control of the Imperial forces with Pellaeon out of the way. He was at the least very significant politically even before that point. This was also theoretically at a time when some people argue the Empire was becoming a more alien-friendly place, as I mentioned earlier. I think this at least refutes part of that idea, where maybe they weren't necessarily doing this anymore, we don't know, but having done stuff like this was clearly not an impediment to advancement, so the attitudes were still very clearly there. Either way, that's going to do it for today's video. I have a few pretty large videos or long videos that I'm working on and kind of planning out, but in the meantime, I'm still hoping to get or stay with the pretty regular releases that we did over December. I did take a few days off of making videos at the start of the year, so if you are not subscribed and you want to see more videos like this on smaller topics or some of the larger ones that'll be coming up, make sure to subscribe, like the video, and turn on notifications for more if you haven't already. Thank you for watching and hope to see you next time.